This is going to be a discussion about monster design, and particularly my videos on design are going to reference other systems, but mainly give the philosophy behind why I made the design decisions I made. Obviously, I had a reason for them, and well, some of them I think are better in general, the principles, and then some of them obviously do are somewhat matters of preferences, and depends on what you're trying to accomplish. You can have a reason to do things differently. So we're going to just talk about monster design. So I thought about pulling up some of like online images of third edition D&D products and fifth edition, but I'd heard about Hasbro doing like copyright strikes and being pretty nasty with people at times. So last thing I need is some big satanic corporation trying to shut down my tiny little YouTube video out of greed and stupidity. So. Uh, I'm not going to list anything, but I will discuss some of their design decisions as I played those systems. Um, and second edition, I think their monster design was really great, and their rules compendium was the best monster manual I've ever seen. The second edition compendium. But anyway, so Rin, basically, I have. I guess I'll just go right down the list. So some size categories. Several classes get advantage against monsters both defensively and offensively based on their size. So, for instance, Rangers get an inherent bonus damage against large and huge creatures. Some treasure, like the Halfling's Magic Tater, when he throws it from a sling, it does damage based on the size. So, medium, it gets like 48 extra damage, 8d8 against large, and 16d8. So, it's like a giant slayer. And then the thief against he gets special checks to reduce damage against large and huge creatures. The idea he's kind of dodging out of the way of ogre, running between the ogre's legs, and very very hard to hit. So he's actually more effective against really strong, powerful enemies, and actually quite surprisingly effective. He's really kind of weak when he's being surrounded by powerful foes his own size. Kind of like he's surrounded by a bunch of guards or something. That's when he's in trouble. But against larger creatures, he's actually relatively more defensive. But yeah, so there is, it goes from tiny, small, medium, large, huge, and those are the categories. And then there's some general guidelines for the size categories. They're not, they're just giving you guidelines. Obviously, certain kinds of creatures based on anatomy, like a dragon, small dragon might be very long technically, but isn't as bulky. So again, a lot of that's just up to the when you design the monster. And then in Rin, the characters roll against the monsters on offense and defense. So it's not like D&D where you're waiting to see if the DM attacks you. You're just kind of sitting there passively. I definitely wanted the characters. Well, it can be kind of fun to see. Oh, here comes the big giant. The DM's going to roll. What's he going to roll? Is he going to hit me? There can be a fun in that. It's kind of out of your hands. But I think it's better to make the uh, defensive element also on the player. So the monsters have a threat, which is a set difficulty, and then you make a defend roll against it. So it's always facing the players, and it also frees up the DM. He's really just rolling damage, rolling a few other things, and it really makes things go pretty smoothly. And then I think I'll skip through that when I'll actually get to the monster tier. So I'm just going to look at and then as far as I do have standard organization rules. So solitary, few, pack, band, horde, throng, and I have the dice range there. And so these are guidelines, obviously, how you organize the monsters. These are just if the DM looks at a monster and wants to get an idea how they're organized, it gives them some guidelines. I do get this from inspired by the Heroes of Might and Magic 2. They had like few, pack, horde, throng, legion. It's different actual numbers and a different progression technically, but similar ideas. And again, AD&D had that, and they're in the second edition had how organization stuff. So it's really just all, again, it all kind of filters back to AD&D. It's amazing how influential AD&D is. They're either imitating it or responding to it, and some of its issues are, it's really interesting how it really is like it's like Tolkien with fantasy. I mean, everybody has a little Tolkien in them. I think whether you're trying to inherently go against him or you're trying to imitate. I mean, it's just, I mean, it's he's kind of ubiquitous. And then as far as types, Rin has generalized types, automatons, bandits, and barbarians. Now, one thing unique about Rin, it does have like humanoid or man-type monsters. It has various type like groups of those. Because of the way the monster manual is thematically arranged rather than alphabetically. So you have a section of automatons, bandits and barbarians, beast men, beasts, celestials, dragons, dwarves, elves, and halflings, elementals, fae, fiends, giants, guards and soldiers, orcs and goblins, priests, wizards, and druids, and undead. And there are two types, the lesser and the greater and undead. I decided to combine those. Actually, my wife recommended. I think it makes sense. I had lesser undead and greater undead, and there was a distinction there, but they're all together now. The only thing I really don't have that's missing is like oozes. And I was aware of that. They're not a huge part of it. I'm going to have a few in there in the expanded rules, and they'll probably just be under like a beast or an elemental or whatever, whatever they fit under. That's really the only one that doesn't really have a place. And again, they have generalized rules. So these aren't listed in the stat blocks. Like when you go to automatons, they won't say immunity, poison, necrotic, and vampiric damage, and resistance, magical damage. You just have the general rules for the monster. They're just not repeated in every type. And a lot of powerful creatures have resistance to magical damage. So automatons, celestials, fiends. But it's all pretty intuitive as to how it works, and it kind of makes sense. I mean, obviously, some of this is fantasy logic, but kind of like, can you poison a creature that's already dead? Necrotic damage, can you deal death damage that's already dead? Can you drain life from a creature that's dead? Well, obviously not. So again, it's magic. It could work in certain circumstances. You can reason different ways with magic. It's not something that's real, but it does have a reason behind it that I think makes sense. That's the same thing with automatons. They're not living; they're animated objects, so they're inherently just resistant to magical damage. You can't poison them. They don't have a normal anatomy. The same with undead. You can't drain life from something that doesn't have life in it, in the traditional sense. So, and in the way that the monster compendium is put together, I'll get to that in a minute. Then I just have an alphabetical list. That's pretty standard. I have monsters by setting, which I designed this thinking like, how do I as a GM design encounters? So a lot of this is just like, how do I actually play and do it? And then I think it'll work well for other people. Like when I'm thinking of an encounter, I'm thinking, okay, I need some sort of dwarf or elf or halfling. I need some sort of bandit or barbarian type. I need some sort of beast man. It's like a humanoid animal basically. There's a bunch of different types. So minotaurs, harpies, for like bird people, a frog man, all those. So I just think, okay, I need an orc. I need some sort of spellcaster type, like either a divine or a wizard or druid. I need some sort of undead. So that's how I build my encounters. I don't alphabetically flip through a book looking for a creature. I go to what I'm looking for an elemental spirit. Okay, let's go to the section on elementals. And then the way that Rin organizes for random encounters is by theme. So we've got the city. If you want a city encounter, forest and plain. Anytime I'm traveling for the mountains and underground, I got to find something that fits. Jungle and swamp, ocean and coast, wasteland and desert. The other one I didn't really put was like cold, Arctic. It's just so rare to have it's kind of so niche. But what you could do is if it's in the mountains, if it's in a cold forest, you can. There's enough that you can improvise. But that's really, I think it covers most things. And then I have it by tier 1 to 2, 3 to 4, 5 to 6, and then tier 7 and 8 are so powerful. Like you're not just going to randomly encounter a lich or a cloud giant just wandering. If you want that, you can. But again, they're just really rare, powerful creatures. And tier 8's really almost like you're almost dealing with like a demigod. So if you're fighting those, that should be planned out by the GM. Or if you just want to happen to have a high level encounter that isn't, it's going to mainly be role playing unless you're just planning on killing the party for no reason. If you just happen to wandering around and find a few archangels, so usually there's going to be some role playing element there. And then also random monster by tier. So if you just on the monsters are put into tiers, and that gives you again. I intentionally didn't do challenge rater or X. I messed around. I thought I was going to do like an XP system for set. I decided just not to do that. There's actually a pretty simple optional system if you want to do it that way. You can basically just like square the tier of the monster, or just like so. Tier 1 to give you 1 or 10 if you want to look at it, like if you want to make it by times 10, if it's like a group of them. Tier 2 would be 40, 90, 160, 250, tier 6 360, 490, 640 for tier. So they're like little guidelines. I might put them in the expanded rules if you want to do that, but I actually don't recommend necessarily. I know it's old school to just give XP values for monsters, but generally it's not just um, not how Rin approaches it. That was just a little design decision. But you can give XP pieces for defeating monsters, which could be kind of like a quest. So it's basically a quest or objective driven XP. But then, yeah, if you just want, like, okay, I need a tier 3, a tier 4. And as you play, you get a feel for how powerful these are. You just, as a GM, as a player, you know, tier 1 are basically just your very basic monsters. Tier 2 are more like kind of elites. Tier 3 are kind of like little mini bosses. And when you're getting to tier 4, 5, 6, you're getting into pretty powerful stuff. And different, like, one might be like a regional boss, one might be like a, you know, a really powerful, like a rock or a colossal griffin, a Rizalka, a young worm, a young dragon. And then again, tier 6 is just you know. So it does, while it doesn't list the details on it's pretty. Once you play, you can get an apparent jump. And when you get to 7 and 8, you're dealing with, I mean, specialized monsters that are incredibly powerful that really are more like campaign, you know, focuses. And that's how, you know. But I think for what I have here in 3 pages, it's all very succinct and a lot of information and tools just in a few pages. And that's also Rin's design for everything but monsters as well. I want everything to be succinct, and you really get probably twice as much content for the page amount. Then the monster manual itself. So it was designed to be very compact, and it's very like, what do you need to know to run these monsters? So this is another design decision that Rin intentionally makes. So this doesn't give you what the Baylor's basket weaving check, and it give him a feat chain of his 32 feats that he has, improved unarmed fighting, beast sense, blah blah blah. If you look at like third edition, I couldn't stand the third edition monster blocks. They were so extraneous, and third edition D&D, and they're just so. I mean, you could have put twice as many monsters with half as much information. I think like earlier editions of D&D were much better. Like, give me the information I need. And then one thing, Rin doesn't have a lot of like the information about them. That was one thing, just a little description. I think that actually is useful to have like another of like giving you some background. What does this creature do? Where does it come from? How does it behave? What are some neat little quirks about it? That actually is really useful. But Rin really leaves that up to the GM, because I'd probably it would either be twice as long, my section on the monsters, the listings, or it was just for how concise I wanted Rin to be, I didn't really want to do that. I also would have to come up with 230 plus, and it's just going through this monster. Editing this was one of the most mind-numbing things in the world. Trying to make sure everything is consistent and such. But in any case, it's laid out according to, you have the monster type, an automaton, which is like a construct. I think in D&D is what they call them. But essentially, it's a like a golem, a robotic, you could say, creature. It's animated by magic. Clockwork gnome, an evil torch, a burning glade, assassin rug, iron golem, stone golem, ivory naga, magic cauldron. These are like objects that are magical. And then it's laid out by tier. So you've got tier 1, you're just dealing with very basic things. Tier 2, a little bit more potent. Tier 3, now you're getting, maybe really elite, or leader of a lot of these lesser tiers. And tier 4, specialty creatures. Tier 5, you're getting very, and tier 6, very powerful tier. And then tier 7, we get to Jade Naga. There is no tier 8 automaton. They don't all go to tier 8. You're dealing with really powerful world-ending kind of things. But yeah. So what it is? Okay, I need an automaton. Where do I go? I want a stone gargoyle, and you're thinking as GM, this is how I build it. All right, I want to find a construct. So it isn't just listed in pure alphabetical order where you got to reference an index. You can just flip through the sections and find what you need. And if you want to edit them, the system has guidelines here in the monster rule and on how to do things. And I probably, in the expanded rules, I will put the actual formula that I use, some actual clearer guidelines, and to help GMs out. I mean, it's obviously really easy to me too because I've made the system, so I know all the ins and outs and expectations. But it's actually pretty simple. Just to, if you're looking at a tier three and you want to make a tier three, take a look at it, look where the numbers fall, and then adjust accordingly. So again, once you learn the system, I think it's fairly intuitive. And then again, if I'm looking for a bandit or barbarian, okay, so I'm thinking, all right, I want to have a thing with forest bandits. I want to have a bunch of berserkers. I want to have, uh, these kind of chaotic human warriors. That's where you go to bandits and barbarians, and it does go all the way up to, you have Wyvern Rider and Scythian King, kind of like a barbarian king, basically. And so that's how I build it, and I find it works nicely. It's by type and then by tier. Beastmen, this is a very large section. There's a Medusa there, like a snake woman, essentially. And you've got your tier ones like a Buffin, a little frogman, a centaur, an ant-man, harpy, and Icky is a little cat man, lizard man, a lupine, porcine, psychic worm. And again, you're just going by tier. Tier two, tier three, mushroom man, basically. And then you have like the leaders of some of these creatures. The great ribbit is a ruler of the Buffins, which are the little frogmen. Um, and uh, and then you have lupine leaders, blunderbuss, formica, the queen of the formicas, the ant-men, high centaur, lizard king. You start getting like leaders: Medusa queen, minotaur king, Celicon tyrant. Tier six is where, and I was going to have a whole thing of like a lizard god. It's a mad false god of lizard men, treacherous, abyssal, and gratuitous. Well, I was going to have a bunch of these, like a lupine god. These are all like these false pagan gods. They're not really deities. They're just these kind of abyssal creatures that the lizard men are worshiping as the god. So you have like different tiers. You have like a lizard man, then you have a lizard man shaman, then you have a lizard king, and then you have lizard god. They're all worshiping. So that's like a progression that I have, and that can be expanded upon if you want to have some sort of minotaur god that they're worshiping. As it can all. But again, what's here is there's a lot of content in a short area. So I do want to actually look specifically at a block and why they're built the way they are. You have the name of the monster, you have the tier, you have a little description: tall and head of bull, legs and torso of man. Or sorry, tail and head of bull, legs and torso of man. They're usually like little fragmentary writings. I don't actually write in full sentences. But again, it gives you the idea of what it is. It has a tail and head of a bull, legs and torso of a man. Its size is large, so I didn't just have a size. I combined size and type. A large beast man. So that tells you what it is. Beast man meaning it's like like it's a humanoid man. It's a bull and a man. Large is its size. So again, certain creatures thieves would get deafness checks to reduce all their damage against them. Rangers would get bonus damage against them based on their huntsmen, what high their percentile is, anywhere from a D4 to D12. So that their size does matter. Organization few to pack gives you an idea of how you're going to encounter them. If a GM's making, all right, how many do I want? D4 plus 1, it's few. Pack is 3D6, 3 to 18, average of 10.5. So just gives you a range of just, so you have an idea of how they're, you find a maze of minotaurs. It's got D4 plus 1 in there, and then it's got a minotaur king in it. So you build encounters using this. Average intelligence, Ren uses 6 types of intelligence: very low, low, average, high, very high. And some spells and special abilities are keyed off of that. It also gives you ideas on, okay, how smart is this creature? So average is generally like human-like intelligence. Below average is kind of like between a beast-like intelligence and a human. So they're kind of like a really dumb human or a highly intelligent beast. And then very low is just like a beast-like intelligence, like an animal. And typically you can't talk or reason, or it's just driven by instinct. High would be like above human intelligence or a really smart human, and very high is generally like more intelligent even than a human can be, just exceptional. So again, strategy, forethought, how you encounter it, how it interacts with you is with that simple little assessment, you can pull a lot from it. Movement, walk 40, it just tells you how many feet it can move in around. Rin is not tied to a battle grid. A lot of it is just meant to be theater of the mind. You could do it on a grid. Generally, I don't. And the movement rules are also a little bit fluid. The character wants to move a little extra, say, well, he's a little bit out of your range, but you can make an agility check to reach the Minotaur, and then in around and still act. So it's a very fluid movement system. Awareness 6. So this is the stealth check. So again, if a character is trying to sneak up on a Minotaur, he must make a stealth check, must get a 6 or higher. Then you'll sneak up on him. And also, you can have kind of like these passive checks. Okay, you're turning a corner, but you hear something. All right, make a stealth check just to kind of not get noticed at the beginning. It's kind of a big large beast, man. It's not terribly sense. So you can kind of the GM can improvise that. Concealment. If the Minotaur is ever trying to sneak up on you, which is not very stealthy, but your awareness, you make an awareness check, a 4 or higher, you notice the Minotaur sneaking up on you. Um, and I actually have every creature does. Like I think fire giants have a 1, but I actually had character. It has a 1 or a 2, and they all rolled terribly, and they didn't have high awareness. They got ambushed by fire giants. They snuck up on the party. It was really hilarious. Almost killed them because they're so powerful. But yeah, they were trying to sneak up on the party. It's kind of humorous, but there's always a chance. I mean, it can happen. Initiative, you make it's against the difficulty of 7, and again, you're rolling a d10 on. So you make an initiative check, which is typically a d10 plus your agility and additional modifiers, and then so a 7 or higher, you act before the Minotaur. A 6 or lower, you act after. Defensive 9, when you're making an attack roll, your attack, the result has to be a 9 or higher. Armor is 3, so it reduces damage by 3. And then vitality is 50. So the monster's blocks do not split prowess and vitality, which you can if you were to take a Minotaur as a monster. You can split into 25 prowess and 25 vitality. It should be more natural. It's just kind of silly because monsters really are just going to get killed, so it's silly to even distinguish between prowess and vitality. But if you did, like, let's say that you had a Thrall, a Necromancer had it, or like in that case, they wouldn't regenerate any hit points. Let's just say you had charmed charmed this Minotaur. You could actually keep it long term, or you had for some reason a friendly Minotaur he was working with. You could give him a quick replenishing hit point pool, just like characters. Then his attacks, again, very simple. He gets 1 axe, 1 gore. The comma means you get both. A period, if it's separating, is like different sets of attacks. The threat is 13, so you must have a defend roll of 13 or higher to get out of his way, which is a high attack. So, I mean, even to a +4 to get a 9 or higher, it's a pretty high attack of 13. 2d10 plus 5 is the damage, and he also gets a gore attack. So, little stat blocks here. There's a lot of information. You can run the whole monster just from this little info here. There's a lot of compact, and that's the Rin philosophy, is very accomplishing a lot with a little. And then I don't have a list of his. Rin doesn't have a skill system. I don't have his 30 skill ratings and his saving throws and his feat chain, and then a giant picture, and then a bunch of other stuff, and things about Minotaurs, and some of that's useful. I don't think putting like the skills and do you need to know what the Minotaur's bluff check is? You can improvise that if a Minotaur is trying to. I mean, it's again, you don't need to know the Baylor's basket weaving check or what his feat chain is. It's pointless, but. I think, like I said, third edition, I think, was just majorly dropped the ball on that. I actually did hear an interview where it was a decision between designers, and I think that like the owner or something just decided to have the whole stat block, which I think was a mistake. But hey, again, not to pick on third edition too much, but I did design Rin. I started to design RPGs because I really just like third edition so much, and I really had like kind of an OSR. I didn't know what it was. I don't even think OSR when I started doing existed at the time, but based on some of this, all the clutter of third edition rules and the loss of the archetypes and some of the things. And again, I did warm up to third edition. I do think actually it had some great elements once you filter out some of the bloat of the rules, and that's kind of what games have done now. Like I know Shadow Dark, that I haven't looked in depth at them, but they kind of kept the refinements and the smoothness of fifth edition, but of third edition and in more contemporary rules, but then they got rid of all the bloat. And I remember, but anyways, okay, so that's enough on that. So as we go down again, beast, you're looking for a beast, you're looking for a warg, you're getting a certain tier of beast. I want a basilisk, I want a periton, a possum, eagle, manticore, red wyvern. It's all there. And then you have celestials and fiends. They're actually put together because, again, having a Christian theology is assumed in the Rin perspective. It's kind of a Tolkienian perspective, where this is an alternate creation of the Holy Trinity. They're basically fallen angels. You have these angelic beings, and they've fallen, and they're weaker intentionally. The archdevils are weaker than archangels by a lot because really the fall of they really lost their angelic dignity. They gave it up for to become these disgusting creatures. Freet, succubus, rakshasa. Um, and then dragons. Dragons are handled. There are so many ways to handle dragons. I did 9. I have sea dragons. They're called sea serpents. I have worms, which are just like land dragons. Are just literally like they don't have. They just have legs and, or you could just literally, I guess, make them a giant worm, but giant like snake. And then you have the actual drakes, which are the winged dragons. Again, you can do this a million different ways. Dragons, you see all the dragons that are in the earlier editions of D&D. They have a whole books about them. They're all cool and interesting and fun, but Rin just basically gives you those 3. If people want more, I can always develop more. But they are unique in the way they approach is very different when you encounter them. Dwarves, elves, and halflings. These are just rules for kind of like you have rules for generic human warriors, generic human fighters. That you don't want to have a whole sheet for where every halfling is. Every is like a class, like a PC. These are just the monster versions of them. So this is where you've got your dwarf warriors. You need a high elf priest. You need a mountain hall king, a dwarf king. You need a dark elf queen, high elf king. You can just reference what you need. Elementals, another important thing in Rin. Mainly, there are different forms of them. And again, from tier 1 all the way up to tier 7, the elemental prince is really super powerful elemental beings. Fae. Fae are kind of seen as almost like a fusion. And I think with regards to the theology, in the natural world, you have man, who is a noetic creature, and then you have the animals, which they have a life in them. They have like a soul. I mean, not necessarily a divine deiform, a God-shaped soul the way man does, but they have like a life in them. And then the plants, or I'm sorry, and plants do as well, and to a lesser extent. But then you just have things like minerals, tables, things that don't really have a life in them, but they do have a being. So in the spiritual world, there's essentially a correlation to that. So angelic creatures are basically man, and angelic creatures are noetic, I guess you could say. They have like these divine capacities, and then you have fae creatures, which basically are like spiritual animals, the equivalent in the spiritual world of animals. And in the fall, when the angels fell, the fae that were associated with them, just like the animals that are associated with them, are deformed. So you look like with Lucifer's fall, you see how insects and serpents are just this kinds of, they're not evil, but you see they've got some things that, like, they inject poison into things, they eat them, there's this creature called a cicada killer that grabs a cicada and rips it apart and shoves its eggs inside it, and they burst out of it. So it's like you can see that the angels each being attached to a different part of creation. Some, when they fell, you see the damage they did. The noonday demon is another one. Why is it so hard to pray at noon? Because the angel's in charge of every hour of the day. All of creation is governed by angels, but particularly noon, that demon, the demon of listlessness, was in charge. Was supposed to make man attentive at prayer. Instead, he became the opposite. And then the whole Fey realm is connected in that way. And then beneath that, you also have just like spiritual water. So there's equivalents of water and fire that they don't really have any real life of their own, but they do have an existence, and they can still harm you and such. So, anyways, Fey creatures are essentially, in the real world, that's what they are. But in my gaming world, they're somewhere in between. They're kind of like a mix between the celestial and the animal. They're in between. So, kind of a cool little element of theology there. Again, you have sylphs, genies, redcaps, leprechauns, and such. Giants, again, they're pretty classic, just big giants, anywhere from ogres all the way up to cloud giants, hill giants, just the different tiers of that. Well, the one that's kind of unique, the meadow giantess, but kind of a different take on the giant. Guards and soldiers, again, if I'm looking, all right, I need town guards, I need champions, I need a folk hero, I need an elite guard, I need a halberdier. These are like the opposite of the bandits and barbarians. They're like the chaotic warriors who are kind of threatening civilization, and then you have the guards and soldiers that are upholding law and order. And again, that old D&D archetype of chaos and law. It's just, you see how it's through fantasy. Orcs and goblins, that's kind of unique. They're like a mix of Fae and the diabolical. It's just a unique mix. In Rin, it's a specific type of creature. Orcs and goblins, priests, wizards, and druids. When you need a spellcaster, you just go here, see what you need: a bishop from a church. You need a light druid. You need an acolyte. You need a grand paladin. You need a master wizard. They're all there. They're all functional. Um, and the last thing is undead. Of course, that's one of the great enemies of any campaign. Undead. And you have anywhere from simple things, flaming skulls, all the way down to like a Draco Mortis, which is this giant undead dragon, one of the most powerful creatures in the game. A zombie god. It's zombie empowered by the worship of cultists. They're worshiping similar to like the lizard god. But so that's essentially how Ren approaches things. Like, what monster am I looking for? All right, I need an undead. Go to the section undead. I need a dragon. Go to the dragons. I need the beast. Go to the beast. And you have just the information you need to run it. And it's actually, again, and it's meant to be very compact. You have a little description on what it is to give the GM some ideas. And again, for how many pages do you have to fit 230 monsters and have them all laid out and fully functional? It's actually very concise. And again, I think a 230 monster manual in a lot of systems would be a whole book. So with Rin, the design philosophy is concise, give you what you need, don't do things that are extraneous. And when you add elements, so you have something, you need to add a lot more than it takes away. Otherwise, you just get clutter. And again, you find out what is the evil fungus's diplomacy check? What feat does he have? What is his blah blah blah? What is this? Rin does not want to do that, and I don't think that's actually good. Again, to know what the Baylor's basket weaving check is, and his offhand AT penalty is reduced by 4 because he has the improved monster grab snatch, blah blah blah. It's just it's extraneous. So in any case, this is pretty much the Rin philosophy on Showcase, and hopefully that gives some light as to shed some light on the decisions in Rin and the qualities of the system and its ease of use. It's I don't know if concision is a word. I wonder if it's concisity. I use the word concision. It might not be a word, but it's concise. And so that'll do it for monster design.